Olá a todos. Hi, everybody. Great to see so many of you already. Don't be shy. Say hello in the chat and let us know where you are tuning in from. Somebody is tuning in from Chicago, but soon Villanova de Gaia. Great. Kentucky. Oh, lots of people from all over the US. Very cool. Well, we're ready to get started. And thank you so much for joining me for another student interview. These are so much fun. I absolutely love hearing real life stories of how people are making Portugal their home, and how learning Portuguese is playing a role in that. We always have a lovely time, and today I'm going to be here with my student Beverly. We're going to hear all about her journey, where she started, where she's at now, but most importantly how she got there, because I really want to encourage as many of you guys as possible to take on this challenge. I know that it is scary, especially if you're doing it later in life. You can think, oh, it's not for me. I don't think I can do it. But hopefully this conversation is going to turn that around for you, and really inspire you to get started. Some more people saying hello. Oh, Alice is here, and Gillian. We've got some fellow pros of Beverly's, which is lovely to see in the chat. Just a quick explainer of who I am. You probably already know if you're tuning in, but my name is Liz and I'm the host of the YouTube channel Talk the Streets, where I teach practical Portuguese in plain English. But I am also the creator of the Portuguese Pro program, which is an online course and community that helps people go from saying their very first words up to having their first conversations with native speakers. And that is how I met Beverly. So let's go ahead and bring her onto the stream so we can say hello and start to hear her story. Hi, Beverly.
Hi, Liz. Happy to be with you.
Very, very happy to have you here as well. And I can't wait for everyone to hear your story, because I know that they're going to find it really inspiring. So we have to take it all the way back to the beginning. Obviously, I know who you are very well, but for everyone who's tuning in at home, can you tell us a little bit more about who you are and why you decided to learn Portuguese?
Well, I am a psychologist from the United States. I'm an educator and worked in higher education for a long time and then retired.
And congratulations.
And so when I did retire, my husband and I talked about wanting to travel, and I like to travel quickly. He likes to travel slowly, meaning being able to settle in one place. And so as we talked about our shared interest in traveling, we thought it would be great maybe to choose someplace where we might want to live and could really settle in and get to know the country, the culture, all of that, from a learning point of view. But also, I really had the goal of wanting to be multilingual, and wherever I lived, I wanted to be able to speak the language of the people in that place. So as we were talking about this, I talked to friends in the United States about places they were considering going, and many of them said Portugal was on their list. I had never been to Portugal, so I was intrigued by this. I've traveled many places, but I'd never been to Portugal. So as we were settling into our retirement years, I was about to celebrate a birthday, my 70th birthday. And I said to my husband, I don't want a big party. I don't want, any of the fanfare that people often have with milestone birthdays. What I want is a trip to Portugal. And so that's what we did. And we came and saw and really fell in love with the country, its beauty, the people. There were so many things about it that we liked, but then we returned home. But I remembered, of course, our Portuguese experience. And then as time went on, it became clear to me that maybe we would really like to live outside the United States, and Portugal might be the right spot. So we traveled again to Portugal and confirmed that indeed Portugal was someplace we'd really like to live. So of course it became important to me to start to learn Portuguese.
Amazing. I love that story. I especially love how, people often think, oh, retiring, slowing down. But I love that you're like, I'm still ticking off some things on my list here. I want to be
Yes.
multilingual. I want to live in another country. So I absolutely love that. And I know that people listening are going to find that really inspiring. By the way, everyone, please feel free to drop questions for Beverly into the comments in the chat at the end. We will come to those. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask her, then please feel free. Okay, so I love it. You were like, I don't want to party. I want to go to Portugal. Then the inevitable happened, which was falling in love with Portugal, because so many people do. So when you first started dabbling, let's say, in Portuguese, what were some of the challenges that immediately stood out to you? Because it's not necessarily an easy language to learn, especially alone.
Well, it's true that it is a challenging language. And before our first trip, I always try to learn a little bit of the language of wherever I'm going so that I can at least say hello, be polite, say thank you, those kinds of things. So I investigated an online app. The one I selected was Pimsleur because they had European Portuguese. And I did some of those lessons on my own, which I think was helpful. And certainly when I first came to on our first trip to Portugal, I was able to do those things: say hello, say obrigada, to be polite. But it's hard to keep yourself motivated with you and an app. And I also, after our first trip, was reading and watching YouTube videos, and I saw some of yours, Liz, practical tips for learning phrases that were practical, and the pronunciation video that you do for people that's free online. I saw that, and then saw about Talk the Streets Portuguese Pro. So I thought this might be actually just what I could use. Self-paced, but an opportunity to engage with a real teacher, other students. I like this notion of being part of a community. So I thought, let's sign up for that, which is what we did.
Excellent. Yes. So when you were first learning, so Pimsleur is indeed very good for getting you through those practical conversations, because you have, you're listening to somebody and then you're repeating it back. What did you find when you were in Portugal for the first time and you were listening to people? Were you able to kind of fill in the gaps of what they were actually saying?
Not initially, because people speak so quickly. And as you know, cut off the beginnings and the ends of words. I've come to understand now why that is structurally. But at the time, it was very hard to understand when people were speaking very quickly. I could, order a cup of latte, I could go into a restaurant and make it known what I wanted to purchase. But I had a lot of trouble with the listening.
Yeah, that's very common. And everybody in the chat, do let me know what your biggest sort of obstacles are at this stage. I think listening is definitely one of the things that people always mention, even if they have been doing apps or anything like that, because in an app people are speaking very slowly and they know it's for learners, but then once you get to Portugal and people are really speaking at full speed, it can be very difficult to keep up. So you started in that exact situation that probably lots of people have done, where you can say a few words but you're still not really understanding very much. If we fast forward to today, what have you been able to do on your most recent visits to Portugal? Because I've been so impressed with your very, very quick turnaround.
Well, thank you very much. I'll tell you about something that happened today. My husband and I were in a restaurant, and he stepped away from the table, and I was speaking to the waiter, who asked me if I was living in Portugal. And I said, yes, indeed. And I started to speak with my limited vocabulary, started to speak in Portuguese, and he stopped me and he said, it's very unusual to meet people who are using their Portuguese. And I told him in Portuguese, I said, Quiero falar muito bom. I want to be able to speak very well.
Yeah, quero falar muito bem. Yeah.
Yeah, muito bem. Yes, he corrected me. But then I said to him, preciso mais prática. Preciso prática. I need to practice. And And then he said something else to me, and we had a very limited but friendly conversation. And then he said, I studied English for 7 years in school. And he
Mhm.
said, how long have you been here? I said, 3 months. And he said, 3 months, you're doing great. And you're doing great. And then he said, I want to talk to you in a year. And
Oh, will
see
you
how,
go back in a year's time?
oh, I'll be back next week.
That's
I'll be
great.
back next
Okay, so
week.
you've already met somebody who is interested in your journey and who is pleased that you're trying. Do you feel like you get a different reaction from people because you are able to use your Portuguese now?
I certainly, yes. People, I think, native Portuguese speakers, Portuguese residents, citizens, I appreciate that you are trying and
Mhm.
are very helpful. That's been my experience. The thing that perhaps was most important to me when we came in December was to meet our neighbors. We live
Mm.
in an apartment building and we have Portuguese neighbors. In fact, most of the neighbors, I haven't met any Americans in this building. So I think just about everyone is Portuguese. But on my particular floor, I have there are two families. And I decided before we arrived that I wanted to reach out to the neighbors and in Portuguese, because I do know that many Portuguese speakers also speak English and will default to English with an English speaker because they want to help you.
Mhm.
So, because it was December and before the Christmas holiday, I decided I would write holiday cards to my neighbors. And in it, I wrote a message, which I got feedback to make sure it was correct,
Mhm.
the, the Talk the Streets team. But I wrote a message introducing myself and my husband. I said we were from the United States and that we were learning Portuguese, and that if our neighbors saw us, I hope they would feel free to speak to us in Portuguese because it would help us learn. And then I wrote, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, all of it in Portuguese. And I left the holiday card at the door of each of my two adjoining neighbors. And what was so delightful to me was that almost instantly, like within an hour, one of the neighbors came and knocked on our door, she and her husband, and they introduced themselves and thanked me for the card. And they said how nice they thought it was that I had left the card. But the wife in that family said, and both parties, the husband and the wife, were both are native Portuguese, but she said she wanted to practice her English and suggested that perhaps we could talk to each other, she in English and I could use my Portuguese. And that was delightful. And
So
then
lovely.
it was really lovely. And then the other family also responded to my card, and I had a chance to meet them. This is a family of three, husband, wife, and a teenage daughter. And the mother spoke to me in Portuguese, and she said, I'm going to do just as you asked, and I will only speak to you in Portuguese. But her daughter is learning English. And so we agreed that her daughter could speak to me in English, but that the mom would only speak to me in Portuguese. And
Amazing.
that has been, and she's been true to her word. I don't
Yeah.
always understand what she's saying, but I have appreciated getting to know the families and their efforts to help me with my Portuguese.
That's fabulous. I want to draw people's attentions to two things, okay? Number one, the smile on your face when you're telling that story and how much it has, really changed your experience, right? How,
Right.
you just feel happy and open and warm and accepted, and we can see how much you're enjoying this process on your face. I think number one, if you've been
Mhm.
worrying about whether or not to do it, that's a really good motivating factor. And number two, how long could you have gone without seeing your neighbors? Again, I bet people listening in, or anybody who's been living in an apartment block for a long time, may have never seen the neighbors. Even though you live in very close proximity, it's very easy to just be, completely crossing each other all the time and never actually meeting. So just that simple gesture of the card that we helped you kind of craft and correct, leaving that out has opened the door to these friendships. And I just love to hear it. That's exactly what all of this is about. Just before we continue, I just wanted to say hi to the people who have joined us, because I know people are coming and going throughout the stream. So if you are just tuning in, this is Beverly, and she's sharing her experience of learning Portuguese to give you guys the confidence to do the same. She started from zero, and now she's having these lovely, warm interactions with her neighbors, lovely compliments from the wait staff at restaurants. If that is something that you would like to achieve as well, just go to talkthestreets.com/apply to see if you qualify for an application call with us, because we would love to welcome even more people into the program. So if this is sounding good to you and you want to find out more, that's where you need to go. So on that note, the community is a really lovely part of what we've built at Portuguese Pro. How have you found that helpful in terms of, meeting people or keeping motivation going to continue learning? Because it can be lonely, right? Learning, embarking on this new journey just by yourself.
That has been one of the real benefits, I think, of Talk the Streets, is certainly being part of the student community. Different from when you're just trying to learn on your own, listening to apps or whatever. And I have appreciated the suggestions that fellow students make. People often post resources that they have found helpful, whether that's podcasts or music to listen to, or simply sharing the wins, which are very encouraging. When you hear about somebody's success with something, it inspires you to try it yourself. And also, as someone who has come to Portugal from the States, anyone in that process knows it's a journey to get the visa, to do the documents, to get your visa appointment, all those things. And so it's not just people sharing tips on the language, but also on the process of getting your visa. And that has been helpful for sure.
Great. I'm really glad to hear that we've been providing that for you. Just taking a look at some of the questions that are in the chat. Somebody has asked, wondering what you found to be the hardest thing about learning in the beginning, because in the beginning, it's very tricky, right? And it can be easy to just give up in the beginning. What did you find challenging, and how did you kind of manage to overcome that to get to where you are now?
Sure. Well, I think everyone struggles with the hesitation to speak. You want to use your words, but you're not certain you're doing it correctly. You don't want to make a mistake, and of course, mistakes are inevitable. And I find that people are quite gentle in their corrections. So that has been not a problem at all. But the thing that I have found most helpful, and also the difficult part, is the learning the sounds of the language. I studied French and I know a little bit of Spanish, and the sounds in Portuguese, even though it's also a Romance language, are not the same. You think you will see a word you recognize and you know how to pronounce it, but the pronunciation in Portuguese is quite different than in either French or Spanish. And so learning those pronunciation tricks, I have really appreciated. I think one of the things that's been most valuable, and I know this is the method in your madness, right?
Yes.
Is to really help us learn the word sounds. I think about it as like phonics and reading. When you learn to read, sometimes you break the words down into phonetics and then you can read the word. And I find that if you break Portuguese words into their phonetic syllables, the phonetic syllables, you can pronounce almost anything. But I can say that now.
Yes.
But at the beginning, learning those vowel combinations and the nasal sounds, and all the shushes.
Yes. It's very shushy. The Portuguese language is very shushy indeed. Well, speaking of your pronunciation, I'm sure everybody who is listening would absolutely love to hear you speaking a little bit more Portuguese. So one of the things that we do as part of the Portuguese Pro course, is we do have 2 pronunciation workshops every week where we work on exactly these things. We are, going through these sounds, practicing them over and over again, and really giving people feedback in real time. And you did such a brilliant one a couple of weeks ago. We have dialogues that relate to all different practical situations you might find yourself in Portugal, but this is a particularly good one because it's a polite conversation with a neighbor who you end up going to have lunch with. Okay, so I think this is quite a good one for people to check out. So I'm going to go ahead and add this. Can I remember how to do it? Yes, I can. So let me find the video file. Here we go. Oh, I didn't have it saved to my computer. So if you give me 1 second, I'll be able to open it. Because was this a hard one, Beverly? Because it was very long, right? This particular dialogue that you're going through.
It was long. But, because these situations, the dialogues are about real life situations, I find that it helps me because I'm imagining actually saying these things to someone. So if you think about it in that way, you have to work out the pronunciation of each word, but then I also try to think about it as how would I really, what would be the actual flow of the conversation, and to then put the words together in that flow. That's kind of how I think about it.
Exactly. And that's why these are so helpful, because they really do emulate normal conversations. So I have it here. I'm about to pull it up. Let's give it a go.
Como estás, minha filha? Olá, Dona Isabel. Estou bem. E a senhora? Tudo bem. Obrigada. Que bonito que está o tempo hoje. Pois é. Sempre me agrada ver o sol. Aonde vais? Vou ao supermercado. A senhora precisa de alguma coisa? Não, obrigada. A minha filha foi ontem. Já tenho tudo o que preciso. Está bem, Dona Isabel. Ela visita há muito? Visita sim, todas as terças e domingos. Muito bem. Deve ser bom ter a família perto de si. E sim, todos os domingos faço um almoço para a família toda. Que delícia! Um dia destes deves passar pela casa querida e almoçar conosco. Seria fantástico. Pois, diga-me quando lhe dá jeito. Pode ser amanhã mesmo. Vou fazer arroz de pato. Maravilha! Agradeço imenso. A que horas? Comemos às 14 horas. Ótimo! Posso trazer alguma coisa? Não, minha filha. Até amanhã, então. Até amanhã, então.
Wonderful. That sounds so natural. People were also saying it in the chat as well. That is not an easy one to go through. Lots of people make so many mistakes, and you hardly made any mistakes at all. And it also felt like you felt kind of confident and calm with it. Is that how it's starting to feel now?
Yes. Sometimes if I want to, I have made friends with the building manager where we live. And sometimes if I know I want to talk to him about something, I will write out what I want to say before I see him. And then, for example, he took a trip. I wanted to ask him how was his trip. And so, I write out the sentence and practice it. So then I can say it with some confidence because I have practiced the phrases. And of course, you can't do that with all the sentences, but I like to be able to start what I want to say with some confidence. And I have found that that's a good strategy.
Yes, I love that, because you were mentioning to me before as well that the building manager, you've needed him to do a couple of errands for you, and that might have been hard to ask, but do you think it had something to do with your attempts at Portuguese that made him much more willing to help and to become more of a friend even?
Yes, well, he has been very helpful in many ways, but also he is another person he speaks English quite well, but also speaks to me in Portuguese. And I try to speak back. But, when I get stuck, I will revert to English or he will help me out. But I think what has happened for me largely through Talk the Streets is feeling much more confident about giving it a try.
I love to hear that. So just once again, because I know more and more people keep adding to the stream. So again, this is Beverly who's sharing her experience of going from zero Portuguese up to making friends with her building manager and her neighbors and having a great time here in Portugal. So if you're feeling inspired and this is something you would like to do as well, just go to talkthestreets.com/apply to see if you qualify with an application call with us. And we would love to have more people join us inside the program. So before we go, I could talk to you all day, Beverly, but I want to address some few more questions in the chat. So if you do have a question for Beverly and how she got this good so fast, drop it in and we'll try and answer as many as we can. One question here, how long have you been learning? Because this person's finding you very inspirational.
Well, I signed up for Talk the Streets in July of 2025. So, so now it's been several months. I will say that for most of that time, I was in the US. And so I had some practice we spent the month of July in Portugal, and we spent some time practicing then. I didn't have as much time to practice. I was pretty busy in the fall, but I did do even when I wasn't studying every day, I tried to do the lessons on Tuesday, the pronunciation challenges every week. And I found that to be really helpful, not only because I got to get feedback, but also you learn vicariously from the feedback that others are getting. It helps you understand, you're rehearsing it in your mind, what the sounds should be.
Yeah. And I love what you said as well about the pronunciation, because even if anybody now can go to a translator or AI generator and get a sentence in Portuguese, but that doesn't mean you'll be able to say it in a way that you'll be understood. So I think that your super hard work on the pronunciation is why you come across more confident and natural. So that's definitely a big tip for anybody who is listening to, really get started and to focus on the pronunciation first. Is there any other advice you would like to give people who are listening and think, wow, I really want to be able to do what Beverly's done?
Well, you have one of the things that you suggested for us to do, especially if we were short on time, is to read aloud from the Portuguese newspaper. And I have been doing that. And I find that also, one, really interesting because you learn from Portugal, but two, I think it helps give you more confidence, and learning new vocabulary. I am really feeling right now that what I need most is more vocabulary, more words, because I'm feeling more and more confident about my ability to pronounce things, even words that I haven't seen before. I can sound them out because I understand the way the words are constructed, and that's really been an important learning.
So glad to hear that. And what about Portuguese Pro? I have to ask you before you go. Would you recommend it?
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. In fact, I do recommend it. And I often tell people, if you just want to test it, look at the Talk the Streets videos that are online. But really being part of the community, having that feedback on a weekly basis has really made a difference for me.
Well, speaking of which, we have to run to one of those sessions very, very soon. Just catching one last question here. Your pronunciation was great. How would you rate the first time you did the pronunciation workshop? I'm not sure if that's in terms of how useful you found it or how scary you found it, but when somebody's putting themselves out there for the first time with their pronunciation, what advice would you give them to stop being so scared?
I was nervous the first time, but I have to say I got good feedback, and that was very encouraging. So, you start with those quotes, and I picked a quote that wasn't very long, but but I tried it out and I got great feedback. And each time I tried to pick one more challenging. And then, Liz, I think you actually suggested that I move on to the dialogues, which I appreciate.
Yeah, because you were so good so quickly. So yeah, I think this is also one of the main overarching pieces of advice that I always give, no matter who it is. You have to just get out there and let yourself fail and fail fast, because then by getting some feedback, you realize, okay, it's not that scary, nobody died. I'm capable of taking some feedback and trying again. And then number two, quite often you can do better than you thought you could. And unless you put yourself out there and try, we'll never know. So
and everybody's learning. I mean, you're in a community of learners, and so you learn from not only what you're getting yourself, but the feedback other people are getting as well.
I'm thrilled to hear it. And again, the smile on your face says everything, Beverly. Like I've tracked your progress from the beginning, and you were quiet and reserved at first, but then you very quickly came forward as somebody who was just doing such a great job of this, and for me is such a model student because of the way you are proactively bringing us things like, hey, I want to write holiday card to my neighbors, and that kind of thing. So wishing you all the best of luck with your continued happy journey here in Portugal and with learning Portuguese. So we will say thank you to you, and I will say thank you to everybody else as well who has tuned in. If you have been inspired by Beverly's story, do not hesitate to go to talkthestreets.com/apply to fill in an application form to see if you might be joining us inside the community with Beverly and I, because we would love to see you. So thank you so much, everybody. Beijinhos e até a próxima. Ciao, everybody.
Ciao.